Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Brands Hatch. We are bathed in sunshine. It's a bit breezy, but we've got the second sprint race of the weekend, round 7 of the 2022 GT Cup Championship, coming up for you from the Grand Prix circuit. It's tight, it's twisty, it undulates. It's a circuit which certainly is not going to give any quarter, and there is very little room for error. So we are in, I'm sure, for a brilliant second sprint race of the weekend. We did have 2 races yesterday, though, here at Brands Hatch. So let's look back at some of the highlights from yesterday's pit stop race. It was a strange start for round 5 of the championship, our first sprint race. Contact on one of the formation laps between Graham Tilley's Mercedes and one of the Top Cats racing with Hex Lamborghinis caused damage to both vehicles, so the safety car stayed out for an extra lap to ensure everything was safe. When the race got fully underway, Morgan Tilbrook led the charge from Ian Logie and Steve Burgess at the wheel of the Radical. However, for Jason Garrett in the Petrolhead Motorsport BMW E46, off and into the gravel at Druids. Morgan Tilbrook would pick up the lead of the race, but the extra pace of the Group GTO Radical would see Steve Burgess get the overall lead, whilst for the lead of Group GTH, there was a great fight going on between the Beluga Motorsport number 50 Porsche and Callum Jenkins at the wheel of the Team Hard Ginetta. Steve Burgess, the race leader, made a mistake at the wheel of the Radical, which allowed Morgan Tilbrook to retake the lead, and there was contact up at Paddock Hill Bend between the Make Happen Mercedes and Phil Carter's McLaren. He was off backwards into the gravel. Steve Burgess would continue to lead, only just though, but with the McLaren stricken in the gravel trap, out would come the safety car, and thankfully for Steve Burgess, he just managed to get a couple of back markers between himself and the rest of the pack. The race would get back underway, and Morgan Tilbrook had to get on it. He'd got Simon Orange at the wheel of the Orange Racing powered by JMH McLaren right on his tailpipes when the race got back underway. And there was also a great fight going on between Ian Campbell and the light green Mercedes of Mike Price. Trouble through the back markers. Rob Trenker couldn't get out of the way. Callum Jenkins almost lost the lead at the wheel of the Group GTH Ginetta, but then a trip into the gravel trap at Paddock Hill Bend would see him lose the group lead. The checkered flag, though, would fly. Steve Burgess would claim the win and make it 5 different race winners out of the first 5 races in 2022. It was going to be Simon Orange and Morgan Tilbrook on the front row of the grid, and when the lights went out, the 2 McLarens were pretty much together. The light green Mercedes, though, of Mike Price was a little bit slow away and was coming under pressure from Lucky Kira through turn number 1. Good battles down through the order as Sam Alpass at the wheel of his unique BMW was looking to try and make progress, but there was contact in the early stages, and getting turned around was the JMH McLaren of Patrick Collins. The lead battle in Group GTB was a great one between the 2 BMWs until Sam Alpass made a mistake and spun his BMW as he went round through Stirling's. But for the Radical in the hands of Ben Dimmock, he was managing to keep his car well and truly ahead of a raft of Ginetta GT3s. A spin at Sheen Curve into the barriers for car number 10 and out of the race for Callum Jenkins. And there was also a great battle for the lead of Group GTH, the 2 Beluga Motorsport teammates going at it tooth and nail. A great move from Ian Campbell saw him sneak up the inside of Ben Dimmock's car, which then lost further places to Ian Logie and to Mike Price as well, but it still continued to lead Group GTH. For Ben Dimmock, though, almost, he got caught out with a little bit of traffic as they were heading up in towards Druids. Slight contact between himself and a GT4 McLaren. The pit window opened for those cars in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC. As expected, they all pitted at the sharp end of the window, and it would be Ian Logie, who had less time to serve in the pit lane, that would be picking up the lead of the race. But he was soon passed by the pro, Michael O'Brien, who brought the McLaren back in to what would ultimately be the lead of the race and on to a win. Morgan Tilbrook had vacated the number 66 McLaren and handed it over to Marcus Clutter, but that car would have to serve a drive-through penalty as a result of a pit lane infringement. There was then a rather gravelly moment for Lucky Kira at Paddock Hill Bend, right the way into the deepest part of the gravel trap, but he still managed to haul the Ferrari out of harm's way. A spin in the latter stages, though, for Adrian Watton into the gravel trap at Stirling's would not bring out the safety car. With 3 minutes to go, a red flag was given, so it was the car number 66 of Michael O'Brien that took the win. So that was a look back at the highlights from yesterday of both the sprint race and the pit stop race. Well, it's day 2 here, and as a result of that second win of the season for Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien, they are the only 2 drivers now that have managed to score 2 wins so far this season. Other than that, it's a single win for everybody, and that keeps them right the way towards the top end of the championship standings. They are, I think, jointly second overall in the championship at the moment, the championship being led by the Radical RXC of Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock. Well, we've got an enormous crowd here at Brands Hatch today as the GT Cup Championship, not for the first time ever, but for the second time in a couple of years, supports the GT World Challenge Europe, and with a certain Valentino Rossi being on the entry list for the GT World Challenge Europe, we've got a very, very large crowd here who are going to enjoy not just this sprint race that we've got coming up from you, also the pit stop race as well later on today. So the cars are heading off on their formation lap, the first of 2 formation laps for this huge grid of cars. So we'll be able to guide you through the way that they will line up. The qualifying took place this morning. The grid is based upon those qualifying times that were posted this morning. And what they'll be doing over the course of this formation lap is building the tyre temperatures in the control Pirelli slick tyre, a new compound that they all run for this year. And of course, building that all-important brake temperature as well. The track temperature is slightly lower than yesterday. We haven't quite had the sunshine that we had yesterday at Brands Hatch, but as the BMW safety car leads them round, we should be able to guide you through the grid. The way that they line up is Morgan Tilbrook starts from pole position alongside his Simon Orange, and all McLaren front row of the grid, and it's an all Mercedes and all Ram Racing road number 2 as Ian Logie lines up alongside his teammate Mike Price. It's Ian Campbell and the Group GTO leading car Ben Dimmock on row number 3, with John Dillon and the Group GTC leading car of Lucky Kira on row number 4. The 5th row of the grid on the inside, it's Warren Gilbert and Tom Webb, with Tom Barrow, the leading Group GTB car from qualifying, sitting there on the inside of row number 6, alongside Paul Bailey, who's foregone the Brabham for the McLaren MP412C Can-Am today, a change of car for number 28. The next row of the grid sees the leading car from Group GT8, James Wallace, line up alongside Roy Millington's Ferrari, and it's Patrick Collins and Matthew Graham who sit there on row number 8. Onto the 9th row of the grid, it's Chris Hart and Alex Stevenson, with Tom Roach and Tim Docker in their pair of McLarens lining up on row number 10. Onto the 11th row of the grid, John Curry in the second of the 2 Make Happen Racing Mercedes has Charlotte Birch for company at the wheel of the second of the 2 Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghinis. Mark Hopton and Philip Carter line up there on row number 12. And row number 13 is where we see Kavi Jundu and Tim Cresswell at the wheel of the Caffeine 6x Motorsport Porsche. Callum Jenkins in the Ginetta has the American Ron Trenker for company on row number 14. And on his own on row number 15, it is the BMW E46 M3 of Jason Garrett that lines up there on the 15th row of the grid. So the cars on their second formation lap, if it's anything like yesterday, the 25 minutes started to click down when they started their second formation lap, so we're probably already now into the 25 minutes race allocated time. Stories from yesterday, well, we mentioned that Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien claimed their second overall win of the season. That means that they lie, I think, on 121 points in the championship coming into this race. Exactly the same number of points that they lead Group GT3 with is being held by the car that leads Group GTC in the championship. Lucky Kira's on 121 as well. Long way to go in the championship. This is only round 7 of the 26 that are scheduled, and we'll have to wait and see as to what else is able to happen. Cars that we lost from yesterday, Graham Tilley's car suffered clutch issues yesterday and is not able to take part today, unfortunately. The mid-engined BMW of Sam Alpass that went beautifully well yesterday, and in the highlights we saw spin out of the lead of the group of GTB. He was never entered for today. And off, and in the barriers, too much weaving of the tyres. There is Mike Price at the wheel of the Ram Racing Mercedes. So we've already had an incident. We've not even got the race underway, and Mike Price, I think, was just caught out there weaving the tyres a bit too much. The car snapped sideways on him, straight into the barriers at Pilgrim's Drop onto the right-hand side, and significant amount of damage to that car. It's stricken sideways in the track, and that surely means that the safety car is just having to stay out. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, he just weaves a bit too much, loses the car as he heads underneath the vehicle bridge, and you can see there's damage to that front right corner of the car. And well, that's a very uncharacteristic mistake there from Mike Price, but that car sideways across the track with front right suspension damage surely means that there's going to be a delay to fully getting this race underway. They'll just leave the safety car out there, the clock will start to tick, and that unfortunately means that that car is out of this race. Ram Racing, I'm sure, will get it repaired for race number 2, but Mike Price is going to be feeling as sick as a dog, I'm sure, as a result of what happened there. There was certainly nobody around him. There was no contact whatsoever, just a small mistake as he got to the crest of Pilgrim's Drop in reality. So safety car will continue round. The lights still remain on it. Frustration for the drivers. They're all keen to get things underway. Frustration for the crowd, of which many of them you can see are wearing their Dayglow yellow in support of Valentino Rossi. The recovery unit will need to go out there and scoop up the stricken Mercedes. So everybody else will now just have the opportunity to again try and build whatever temperature they can in their control Pirelli slick tyres and build those brake temperatures as well. Pirelli having been the control tyre supplier in the GT Cup for a good number of years. Tyres are limited though. You're only restricted, only allowed, or you were restricted to 3 sets of slick tyres per day. So they would need to see you through both the warm-up, qualifying and the 2 races. And there's the rather forlorn sight of Mike Price. The body language tells you all you need to know there about how Mike is feeling about what just happened. As we say, you know, in the nicest way, he can only blame himself, but you know, just one of those unfortunate mistakes. And I feel hugely sorry for Mike, because yesterday, I would say, of all of the drivers yesterday, I think I singled him out in commentary as the driver that really impressed me. Had lots of pace around him and was certainly able to stick up with on the pace and on the coattails of some far more experienced AM drivers who have maybe got more years driving that Mercedes GT3 than he had. But he was right up there with his teammate from Ram Racing, Ian Loggy, yesterday. So the recovery unit waiting for the gap in the traffic so they can then work out the best way to recover this car out of harm's way. As I suggested, the clock has already started to tick down, unfortunately. So what is already a 25-minute sprint race, we're already 4 minutes into it, and it's going to be at least another lap or a couple of laps, I would have thought, before we're able to get things underway. As always, a huge amount of variety in the GT Cup Championship. By far more McLarens nowadays in terms of numbers than anything else, whether they be GT3 spec McLarens or GT4 spec McLarens. But McLaren, Mercedes, Lamborghini, BMW, Porsche, Ginetta, all represented on the grid. And of course the Radical that we've got, the Radical RXC, that went to the top step of the podium yesterday. First win of the season for Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock, who share that car. And of course that white Radical that sits there on what is the 3rd row of the grid, the number 7 car, is the championship leader, if I've got the maths right. 144 championship points coming into this weekend, even though it can't quite score maximum championship points. And that is because that car runs in Group GTO, and there are not as many entrants in GTO this weekend, so they can't score full championship points. So even if that car wins its group, it would be 18 championship points. If you're in one of the other groups, such as the entries in that, you are going to claim 25 points for the win. So at least this weekend. There's the number 17 car. We saw that entangled in problems in the first lap of yesterday's sprint race. Patrick Collins behind the wheel of the Orange Racing powered by JMH machine. There's the Team Webb Lamborghini. That runs in Group GTC, which is for later model challenge cars, so they have to have been built within the last 5 years. So that runs to Lamborghini Super Trofeo specification. The best way to tell the different groups apart is to the edges of the windscreen headers. So there is Tom Barrow's Group GTB BMW. You can tell it's a Group GTB car because the edges to the windscreen header are purple. So just to guide you through those, if it's a Group GT3 car, the edges to the windscreen headers are blue. If it's a Group GTC car, it's a slightly lighter blue. So it's not a dark blue, it's a lighter blue if they're a Group GTC spec car. Group GTO cars, they're green to the edges of the windscreen headers. It's red if it's Group GTH. And for Group GTB, as I mentioned, it's purple. So that's the way you can tell the different groups apart from the very edges of their windscreen headers. And with now 18.5 minutes to go, we'll shortly see how the clearing up is being done. Tail end of the grid is the BMW E46. There's Ron Trenker, the American driver. He's not in for the full season, Ron Trenker. Rich Mason, who is not able to race at the moment, is scheduled to take over that number 80 car for the latter part of the season. But Ron Trenker, who's been racing in the Pure McLaren series at the Circuit of Americas in the past and has done some GT4 racing out in the States, the New York resident, is in for this race, and Snetterton as well. There's number 77, that's Mark Hopton, driving one of the many Greystone GT prepared cars that we've got in the field. Greystone bringing drivers through out of track days and performance car track days in particular into circuit racing. Mark Hopton was with them last year and did a good job. There's one of the two Make Happen Racing Mercedes, that's the number 96 car, a former Ginetta G40 Cup racer and Caterham Academy racer actually as well, was John Curry for a period of time. There's one of the new cars for this season, the brand new Ginetta G56 as well, which is always nice to see out. Alex Stevenson, who finished third in the GT Cup Group GTA last year, third also in 2020 as well. Partnered up again this year with Yorkshireman, his fellow Yorkshireman James Kellett. Nice to see that G56 car out. The G56, of course, superseding the G55, V8 engine in it as well. We've already nearly had now 10 minutes of this race. Hopefully Mike Price's car will be out of the way by next time we get towards Pilgrim's Drop. The difficulty being also is that it's a very tight timetable with not just ourselves broadcasting our races live, but the GT World Challenge Europe broadcasting live as well. And to ensure that everything happens on time, it's not just a case of throwing the red flag for that one and halting proceedings and then get going. The timetable doesn't really allow for it. It's so tight, so that's why safety car is deployed. Hopefully Mike Price's car out of harm's way this time through. There's the number 56 Roy Millington driven car. Roy had a big off in pre-season testing at Alton Park, which destroyed the car, so a new car was sought in advance of Donington. It was nip and tuck as to whether they were going to get out at Donington, but just managed to do it, Roy Millington. So it's nice to see Roy back at the wheel of the 488 Evo. Not a huge amount of racing experience really for Roy Millington, but has been quick and under the tutorage of Benny Simonson, who he shares the car with. Benny's the pro, so can't take part in the sprint race. He's come on really well. And again, just to clarify that point, none of the pro drivers can take part in the sprint race. If you are a sporting driver, you're eligible to take part, and if there's two sporting drivers in a car, you have to nominate who's going to race in which one. But we do have a third categorisation of driver over the course of the last couple of seasons, and that is a pro sporting. If you're a pro sporting driver, you can only race in one of the two sprint races over the weekend. There's the orange McLaren. Now, we mentioned earlier on that Paul Bailey had foregone the Brabham BT62, which has been slightly highly strung since it first appeared in the GT Cup Championship. I'm not going to go into the details of why that car isn't out, but Paul has available to him this fairly rare McLaren MP412C Can-Am. And if you're wondering what a Can-Am variant of an MP412C is, well, in reality it's an unrestricted GT3 car, so it has more power, it has even more aero, so there's no balance of performance with it as such, and that was one of only 3 Can-Am spec McLaren MP412Cs that were ever built really. So Paul has brought that one out today, which was what we saw him in at Donington Park, and we saw him in that car for a fair chunk of last season, whilst the Brabham was still proving to be rather troublesome even back then. So first 10 minutes of this race underway, and sadly we've not even had a racing lap as yet, so hopefully rather than pent-up frustration when we get the green flag flying, we're going to see an element of caution, because what we don't need, of course, is drivers getting frustrated whilst they've been sitting there for 10 minutes wanting to get going, and then the green flag flies and they all want to get going a bit too much, trip over each other, and out comes another safety car. So let's just hope that we can get this race underway and that everybody just sort of bides their time, lets the race settle down a little bit and then push on. Now, how is the clearing up of the Ram Racing Mercedes going? It is almost there. Well, it's up against the barriers now, so I would say that's probably in a safe enough position now. What we now need to do, though, is get that breakdown truck out of harm's way. So Mike Price surveying the damage. The breakdown truck will have to wait for a gap in the traffic and then have to get itself back behind the barriers. Now, the closest gap in the barriers is behind where the truck is, so I'm not sure it's going to go the wrong direction around the track. I would imagine it will head in the circuit direction, and just before Westfield, I think, so after the Derek Minter Straight, I think there's a gap in the barriers there where it might be able to sneak through, but unfortunately, I think we're probably going to have a further lap behind the safety car, because I don't think the recovery unit will be out of harm's way behind the barriers and parked up, and communicate that to race control before the safety car gets to a point that it can switch its lights off. So I think this is probably the lap we're on, and one more thereafter behind the safety car, which will be hugely, hugely frustrating for everybody. So yeah, everybody's still weaving from side to side. Safety car boards and lights are still out, flags are still flying. So I think one further lap behind the safety car and then we'll be good to go. And it's all caused by that small mistake from Mike Price. I think it was just on the crest of the hill, so I think what he was doing, weaving, there was nothing wrong with that, but I think what he hadn't perhaps accounted for was the fact the car was going to go that little bit light as it went over the crest of the hill underneath the vehicle bridge, and I think it was probably just that weight transfer in the car where as it got to the crest, the car just went that slightly bit lighter for a split second as he was rotating the car and putting some steering input in, and I think it was just that with where he was on the throttle at the time, a combination of all of those factors just snapped the car away from him into the barriers. Sideways then in the middle of the track, unfortunately. Little choice but to deploy the safety car, and that's why now of the 25-minute race, we've got 11 and a half left. And by the time the safety car brings them round, because the safety car will be in at the end of this lap, is the information that we're receiving from race control. We're going to be down to, what, 10 and 3/4 minutes of the race. That's all we're going to get in, I'm afraid, in this sprint race. So drivers will want to get on with it because they've got less time to try and work their way up into a potential group winning position. As we say, hopefully that also means that they'll treat the first couple of corners with a bit of caution as well. They've had plenty of laps now to build some temperature in the tyres, but circulating around behind the safety car still doesn't build enough, I'm afraid. You need to be under full racing conditions to make sure that the tyre temps and the brake temps are all where you want them to be. So Morgan Tilbrook it will be that will finally get this race underway. The lights are still on the safety car as they come through Sheen, but they should be turned off on the run in towards Stirling's, I would have thought, and then it's up to Morgan Tilbrook to decide as to when he wants to get things going. Simon Orange in the dark blue McLaren there in second position, Ian Logie in the first of the Mercedes in third place. We're finally going to get round 7 of the GT Cup Championship underway properly, with the first 15 minutes having been behind the safety car. We finally can get racing. Good start from Morgan Tilbrook, really good start from Simon Orange. Ian Logie a little bit slower away at the wheel of the third place Mercedes. Ian Campbell sits there in fourth place, but he's under attack by the look of things from the Radical of Steve Burgess, which we saw yesterday was so quick, that Group GTO car in a straight line. So the championship leading car sits there in fifth position, leading its group at this stage, as they head up towards the braking area for Druids for the first time. Behind him is John Dillon at the wheel of the Lamborghini. That's a GT3 spec Lamborghini. We do have lots of Lamborghinis in this race, but most of them are running to Lamborghini Super Trofeo specification. That number 61 car, directly behind the Radical, with its blue and its green flashes, is a Pucker GT3 car. So out of Stirling's, out of Surtees rather, and starting to build the speeds as they head down Pilgrim's Drop, Hawthorne Hill in a straight line. You can see the Radical has got the legs on the McLaren 720. Ian Campbell tries to brave it out all the way around the outside. They almost lean on each other. Campbell needs to be careful he doesn't run out wide. He keeps it within the confines of the circuit, and they're still side by side as they head round through Westfield. There is no let-up. Ian Campbell is not going to let the Radical through easily, but finally, having prized the door open a couple of corners earlier, Steve Burgess goes through to take the place away. He's up to fourth, Campbell's down to fifth, but now under attack from John Dillon's Lamborghini, who thought about going up the inside, carries a bit too much speed in, runs onto the curbs, onto the grass on the way out. That slows his exit, and now he's under pressure from the Group GTC Ferrari in the hands of Lucky Kira. Can't quite make it through though, Lucky. So good little squabble that. And you can see just how much now the Radical and Ian Campbell have escaped up the road. John Dillon, having cleaned his tyres off, just needs to be conscious still that they might not have full grip still as he heads through Paddock Hill Bend, but by the skin of his teeth, it was just the one position that was lost there by John Dillon. Warren Gilbert, Tom Webb, there is the Group GTB leading car. That is going to be Tom Barrow, who leads Group GTB currently at the wheel of the Saxon Motorsport BMW. He's running inside the top 10 at the wheel of that V10 engined machine. But Morgan Tilbrook out front, leading the way at this stage. He leads the race and leads Group GT3. Simon Orange in the identical spec car, sitting behind him at the wheel of the second of the two McLaren 720Ss. As they stretch their legs along the short straight, the Derek Minter straight, and up towards Westfield Bend. Now, we saw great things from Morgan Tilbrook yesterday when he managed to finish in second position himself and Marcus Clutton in the pit stop race. They also finished second in the sprint race yesterday, did Morgan Tilbrook when he was driving. So it's been a consistent weekend for them so far. 2 second places overall. Not as yet a race win. The car that's hunting him down, though, Simon Orange, looks as though he's a little bit quicker this time through. There was 3 1,000ths of a second difference between their lap times last time through. This time through, as they flash their way over the start-finish line. At 0.4 of a second quicker is Simon Orange, so the lead advantage has come down. It's a 1 minute 25.4 from Simon Orange. It was a 1 minute 25.8 from Marcus Clutton, so the pressure is beginning to build to a degree now for the race leader. There's only 7 minutes remaining. For the 9th time they start to head along the Cooper Straight and up towards the braking area for Surtees Corner. Now, Morgan Tilbrook, I think, has responded in this first sector this time. Yeah, he's 0.4 of a second quicker than Simon Orange through the first sector, so he realises that the gap was closing. He's got his foot down. He's tried to pull back away again and increase the amount of daylight between himself in the race lead. And that car there, Simon Orange, who himself is a former overall champion in GT Cup. For Group GTH, let's have a quick look at what's going on in Group GTH, and we just saw the 2 Porsches there. The Veluga Porsches have been pretty much inseparable all weekend so far. They are fighting away for the lead of Group GTH at this stage, in 13th and 14th place overall, which is going to be James Wallace driving the number 50 car, coming under pressure from the team sister car that sits behind, which is Matthew Graham. He was a very late call-up for this weekend, Matthew Graham. So they are first and second in Group GTH. That's for the GT4 homologated cars. And third in Group GTH at the moment is going to be Chris Hart at the wheel of the Make Happen Racing number 69 Mercedes. So good fights all the way through the order, as is usually the case in GT Cup. For the lead of the race, last time through, Morgan Tilbrook was 0.3 of a second quicker than Simon Orange. So Morgan Tilbrook with a 1 minute 25.033. I think that's the fastest lap of the race that we've had so far. Now, what can he do about trying to cement that? Because again, it looks as though Simon Orange is pushing again on this lap and is looking to try and close back up again. So speeds build as they head down through Pilgrim's Drop, up Hawthorne Hill, in towards the almost banked corner Hawthorne. You don't really get the impression as to just how banked Hawthorne is. Really hugs the car in towards the apex if you get it right. Daunting corner at the speeds that these GT3 and GTO spec cars are going. Ben Dimmock at the wheel of the championship leading Radical. Still sitting there 4th place overall in the race, but that's good enough for them to scoop up a group win potentially and an extra 18 championship points heading their way. McLaren, Mercedes. The top 3 currently, with this car here sitting there in 3rd position, Ian Lockey. Now for the lead of the race, that gap has certainly closed up again here. Simon Orange has had a good lap this time through. The gap was 0.6 of a second. As they go through this time, it is certainly going to be down and less than that. So Simon Orange is now within 0.3 of a second of Morgan Tilbrook for the lead of the race, down into the 1 minute 24s from Simon Orange. 1 minute 24.780 now, the fastest lap of the race. That nets an extra championship point if you set the fastest lap in your group. Now Simon Orange has picked that up for the moment. What can he now do about really mounting a challenge for the lead of the race with 4 minutes remaining? There's a couple of car lengths between the 2 McLarens. The Enduro Motorsport car leading the way. The orange powered by JMH McLaren of Simon Orange sitting there in 2nd position. Remember, these are the amateur drivers that are driving all Simon Orange. Big mistake. Carried a bit too much speed and clobbered the curb a bit too much there, which unsettled the McLaren. Bit of arm twirling brings the car back under his spell, and he probably only lost about 2 car lengths, maybe 3 as a result of that. But that was a very fast moment here. Just look at the angle that the car got towards, and it tried to snap back the other way when he applied some opposite lock, and he beautifully controlled that car. But I'm sure that would have spiked the heart rate at the time for Simon Orange. This is another McLaren GT3 that we've got. This is the Greystone GT car in the hands of Ian Campbell. He's sitting there in 5th position at the moment. We've seen this car claim an overall win. Ian Campbell and Ollie Webb. And that's Tom Webb, I'm afraid, is out of the race and on the grass. That's on the exit of Westfield, where I would imagine he's had a spin. Yeah, you can see the tyre marks, telltale tyre marks of the spin. Tom, I think with the Lamborghini undamaged, will rejoin the track. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, a bit too much curb maybe on the exit of the corner. Car got unsettled, spins to the inside, did well to keep that out of the gravel and the barriers, so well done to Tom. But for the lead of the race, we've now really only got what lap they're on and 2 more thereafter. Morgan Tilbrook soaking up the pressure here from Simon Orange. Simon moving over from the GTA and GTH categories in the last couple of seasons up to this GT3 car for this year. So a steep learning curve to try and understand, in particular, the way that the performance works on a GT3. You know, a lot more aggressive on the brakes that you can be. You have to trust the aero on the car as well, the aero grip on the car, and it's counterintuitive really as a driver. The faster you go, the better the grip gets, but trying to switch your head around that, having driven GTA Ginettas and GTH McLarens in the past, takes a bit of understanding, but lots of testing in the off-season has allowed Simon Orange to be bang on the pace this season. There's traffic just up the road. Ron Trenker's GT4 McLaren needs to move out of harm's way, so the 570S moves out of harm's way while the two 720 SGT3s carve their way through. So Morgan Tilbrook, with a lap and a bit to go, is going to start to feel the pressure here. Beads of sweat, no doubt, dripping down his brow. He'll be watching his mirrors. He'll be keeping an eye on the in-car rear-view camera as well, just to try and understand where Simon Orange is at all of the points around the track, making sure that he's clean off the corners. You can afford to be a bit slower in. You've got to be clean off coming out. And we've got one car there in the gravel trap by the look of things. That looks like it might be Callum Jenkins in the Ginetta. Could see the waved yellow flags. I think just saw the tail end of what looked like the Team Hard Ginetta in the gravel at what was Surtees. So just over 60 seconds and a tiny bit of change to go. Morgan Tilbrook has led every lap of this race so far. Remember, the first 15 minutes of it largely were under the safety car, so we've only had 10 real minutes of racing. It really has been a sprint race. As they then thread their way through Sheen Curve and up towards Stirlings, they'll be ready to start the final lap of the race next time through. McLaren 720S from McLaren 720S. A long way adrift of these two is Ian Loggie's Ram Racing Mercedes in 3rd position. 4th place is the leading car in Group GTO. But for the lead of the race, onto the last lap they now go. Now, what we've got here, our Group GTH cars busy squabbling away. This is going to be Jason Garrett's BMW that is under attack from Tom Roach's Paddock Motorsport McLaren. Tim Kresick is in there as well at the wheel of the Caffeine 6 with Par Motorsport Porsche. So they're having a great little squabble towards the tail end of the field. No overtaking as they approach that part of the track. For the lead of Group GTH, that's tight as well. It is still just the number 50 for Luga Motorsport car in the hands of James Wallace, despite the very best efforts of Matthew Graham, who almost ran out of track there, heading around through what was Hawthorne and Westfield. So that fight will continue for a further lap as well for who's going to come out on top in Group GTH for the GT4 homologated cars. Now, for the lead of the race, traffic is having a pivotal role to play as well here. Tim Kresick moves the Par Motorsport Porsche Cayman out of harm's way. Simon Orange decisively throws one up the inside, but he's running out of time here, running out of opportunities to see whether he might be able to unlock the door to the lead of the race. He's having a really good push at the final few corners. Tom Roach is just up the road as well at the wheel of the GT4 spec Paddock Motorsport prepared McLaren, and Simon Orange has almost got an overlap here on Morgan Tilbrook. The two are pretty much side by side, but the back marker is in the way. Tom Roach moves out of harm's way so as to not compromise either, and I think by the skin of his teeth here, Morgan Tilbrook is going to hang on to it and secure top honours for himself and Enduro Motorsport in round 7 of the 2022 GT Cup Championship, chased all of the way to the start-finish line by Simon Orange, who finishes in 2nd place. There's Ian Loggie in the Mercedes. He will come through to finish in 3rd place. 4th place will be the winner of Group GTO, which will be the car of Ben Dimmock. But for the lead of Group GTH, is it going to be James Wallace? Could it be the sister for Luga Motorsport Porsche? These two cars all the way through yesterday's sprint race, pretty much most of the way through the pit stop race yesterday, were nose to tail. They have proved that they are pushing each other within the team as hard as possible, and it certainly looks as though James Wallace, a very young driver who has only just stepped up from the Junior Saloon Car Championship and Fiesta Juniors and things like that in the past, not really having raced a GT car before or raced on slicks before, is looking as though potentially he is on for another win here. They're bottled up behind Roy Millington's Ferraris. They fight for the lead of the group. And is there anything that can be done about it on the run down in towards Clark Curve? I don't think so. Nice and neat and tidy is James Wallace. I think Matthew Graham is just going to come up short at the wheel of the sister car as they head over the start-finish line. No, can't quite do it. So it is a win in Group GT8 for James Wallace. By golly, he had to work for that one. The number 51 car of his teammate Matthew Graham just coming up a little bit short in that race. So he will have to settle for second in Group GTH, but a great fight that they had all the way throughout that, and looking forward to seeing how those cars get on again in the pit stop race that we'll have a little bit later on today. The last few cars just trickling their way over the start finish line now, but the win goes the way of Morgan Tilbrook, which now means that that car has also won 2 championship races so far this season, because we saw the number 66 Enduro Motorsport McLaren also claim victory in what was round 2 of the championship, the second of the 2 races at Donington Park. So the circuit being cleared, we've got Mike Price's car to scoop up as well from where it came to rest with its unfortunate incident on the formation lap, where he lost control of the car and the car slid sideways into the barriers. And once we've got him scooped up, and I think Callum Jenkins at the wheel of the Ginetta, we never quite saw that car, but I think that was the car that was in the gravel trap. So confirmation then of the results. It's a win for Enduro Motorsport and Morgan Tilbrook, with Simon Orange in second place and Ian Logie in third. Steve Burgess was fourth, ahead of Ian Campbell and John Dillon, with Lucky Kira, Warren Gilbert, Tom Barrow and Paul Bailey completing the top 10. Roy Millington was in 11th. The Group GTH winning car, James Wallace, was in 12th place, ahead of Matthew Graham, Stephen Walton and Alex Stevenson, gives you the top 15. Just outside of the top 15 in 16th position, despite having had a spin, it was James Webb that finished in 16th position. 17th goes the way of Tom Roach, with the 18th place being the car of Patrick Collins, Tim Docker, John Curry. Mark Hopton completes the top 21 ahead of Charlotte Birch, Philip Carter, Kavi Jundu, Tim Kresick. Ron Trenker was the last of the finishers. Problems for Callum Jenkins, problems for Jason Garrett, and problems also, as we saw, for Mike Price. That gives you the confirmation of the results for round 7 of the championship. So let's look back at what is now very shortly going to be some of the highlights. When the race got underway, unfortunately, we were about to complete 2 formation laps, but Mike Price was weaving a bit too much, really. Got caught out on the second formation lap and pitched his Ram Racing Mercedes into the barriers. With that stricken across the side of the track, safety car stayed out for the best part of 10 minutes, and we finally got racing underway with, as ever, in a straight line, the Group GTO Radical of Ben Dimmock. Very quick in a straight line. Ian Campbell tried to brave it out around the outside, but eventually had to give way to the Radical, and that dropped the McLaren down a position. He then came under attack from John Dillon, who ran his Lamborghini out wide and almost lost a second position to the Group GTC leading car at the time, which was Lucky Kira's Ferrari. For the lead of the race, it was always about the 2 McLaren 720Ss, with Morgan Tilbrook trying to hold off Simon Orange. We had a spin out on the back section of the circuit for Tom Webb, and also a very scary moment through the fastest section up at Hawthorne for Simon Orange, who hung on to it, lost a couple of car lengths, and a lap later was right back onto the coattails of the race leader. There was a great battle towards the tail end of the field as well. Jason Garrett trying to fight off Tom Roach, but it would be Morgan Tilbrook and the Enduro Motorsport car that would come through to claim its second win of the 2022 championship season, and that gives you what happened in round 7 of the GT Cup Championship. Well, that's it for us here at Brands Hatch for the moment. Thanks for joining us for round 7. Don't go anywhere, though. Make sure you are back with us later on today, because, of course, we have that pit stop race coming up to conclude our weekend of racing here. So from everybody here at Brands Hatch, until later on today, it's goodbye.